You know, I've lived on this earth for almost 75 years. I've seen wars, recessions, heartbreak, and miracles. But let me tell you something. Friends, nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for the battlefield called family drama. And the story? Well, it all started with a cheap bottle of wine. Yes, you heard me right. Not betrayal. Not some $1 million inheritance. Just a $5 bottle of sour grape juice disguised as wine. Now, before I tell you about the wine, let me set the stage. I'm a retired teacher, widower for the last 12 years, living alone in the same old house where I raised my son, Daniel. I poured everything I had into that boy. Education, love, discipline, second chances. His mother and I skipped vacations, ate beans and rice some weeks, just to make sure Daniel could go to college without drowning in debt. Fast forward 30 years, and my son is married to Rebecca. Ah, Rebecca, my daughter-in-law. She's the kind of woman who can smile at you in public while stabbing you under the table with a fork. Always polite to strangers, always cold to me. Now don't get me wrong, I don't need a parade every time I walk into the room. But a little respect, a thank you now and then, that shouldn't be too much to ask. So, last year, on my 74th birthday, Rebecca came waltzing into my house with Daniel behind her. No wrapped gift, no thoughtful card. Just a bottle of wine. Cheap, dusty, probably bought on clearance at the grocery store down the street. Now, I may be old, but I'm not blind. I know my wines. And this one wasn't even worthy of cooking with. She placed it on my table with this fake smile and said, "Happy birthday, Dad. Thought you'd enjoy this." I thanked her, of course. What else could I do? I'm not a rude man. But inside, I could feel the insult burning. This wasn't a gift. This was a message that said, "You're not worth more than this." The next day, my phone rang. Caller ID, Rebecca. I sighed, picked it up. Her voice was sugar-coated, like she was proud of herself. "So, how's the wine?" Now, here's where my years of being a teacher came in handy. You see, patience teaches you timing. And timing? That's everything in revenge. I leaned back in my chair, cleared my throat, and said casually, "Oh, I didn't drink it. I gave it to your mother. She drinks like a thirsty cow, so I figured she'd enjoy it." Silence. Dead silence. Then a sharp inhale, followed by, "You did what?" I swear, I could hear the steam pouring out of her ears through the phone. That little remark of mine, it was just a spark. What followed was a wildfire. Within a week, my son stopped calling me as much. Rebecca stopped visiting altogether. I'd hear whispers when we had family dinners. Snide comments, passive-aggressive remarks. Suddenly, I was the villain, the grumpy old man who disrespected his daughter-in-law. But here's what they didn't know. I had only just begun. Because if Rebecca thought she could humiliate me with a $5 wine bottle, she was about to find out that age doesn't make you weak. It makes you clever. And clever men, we don't just fight back. We plan. After that phone call, the air between us grew colder than an Alaskan winter. Rebecca didn't speak to me for weeks. And when she finally did, her words were sharper than the knives in my kitchen drawer. My son, Daniel? He followed her lead like a lost puppy. Every time I called him, she'd be there in the background whispering, "Why do you let him treat me like this?" Or, "He doesn't respect me." Daniel, he never has. And like clockwork, my son would sigh and repeat her words back to me. "Dad, you were out of line. She was just trying to be nice." Nice? Nice would have been a handwritten card, maybe a framed picture of us as a family, or even just a dinner together. A $5 bottle of vinegar in disguise? That wasn't nice. That was a slap. A few weeks later, they invited me over for dinner. I almost didn't go, but curiosity got the better of me. I showed up with a smile, holding a box of pastries from my favorite bakery. Rebecca opened the door, gave me that plastic grin, and the first words out her mouth were, "Oh, you brought something. How thoughtful." Now, I know sarcasm when I hear it. I spent decades teaching teenagers. It's basically a second language. Dinner was tense. Rebecca kept throwing little jabs. Some people don't appreciate gifts. Wine is wasted on certain taste buds. And every time, Daniel laughed nervously, trying to change the subject. But then, halfway through the meal, Rebecca leaned forward and said, "You know, Daniel and I were talking. Maybe it's time you thought about moving into a senior community. It'd be safer for you." My fork froze in midair. Safer? No, no, no. That wasn't about safety. That was about getting me out of my own house. I smiled politely and said nothing. But inside, I felt the ground shift. This wasn't just about wine anymore. This was about power. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the past in my head. I remembered every sacrifice, working 2 jobs to keep Daniel in school, paying for his wedding when he couldn't afford it, even helping with the down payment on their house. And now they wanted to push me out like yesterday's trash. But you see, I've read enough mystery novels in my old age to know one thing. Villains always underestimate the quiet ones. And Rebecca, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because if she wanted a war, I was ready. The next week, fate handed me a gift. I had gone to their house to drop off some paperwork Daniel needed. Rebecca wasn't home, but her laptop was open on the kitchen counter. I know, I shouldn't have looked. But curiosity is a powerful thing. One email subject line caught my eye. Senior living brochures, urgent. I clicked, and what I saw nearly knocked the wind out of me. Emails between Rebecca and some real estate agent. She wasn't just talking about moving me to a senior home. She was actively plotting to get me declared unfit to live alone. She wanted to sell my house, use the money, and put me in some one-room facility like a prisoner. And Daniel, he wasn't objecting. He was agreeing. I felt my heart pound, not from fear, but from rage. The kind of rage that only comes when the people you love most turn their backs on you. I closed the laptop, walked out of that house, and swore to myself, they want to play games? Then let's play, but I'll be the one writing the rules. From that day forward, I stopped being just a father and father-in-law. I became an investigator. I started documenting every insult, every manipulation, every time Rebecca snapped at me in public or tried to guilt Daniel into agreeing with her. I wrote it all down. I even bought a little voice recorder, tucked it in my shirt pocket during family dinners. And no, the things I captured, Rebecca mocking me, Rebecca calling me a burden, Rebecca saying to Daniel, the sooner we get him out, the sooner we can renovate and maybe sell the house. Each word was a nail in the coffin she was building for herself. And little did she know, I was the one holding the hammer. You know, people assume old age makes you slow. What they don't realize is that age gives you patience. And patience, my friends, is the deadliest weapon of all. Rebecca thought she had me cornered. She thought she could shuffle me into some cramped senior facility while she and Daniel enjoyed the house I built with my own 2 hands. But I wasn't about to let that happen. So I did what any good chess player does. I stopped reacting and started planning. The very next morning, I paid a visit to my lawyer, Mr. Harris. Old friend of mine, sharp as a tack even in his 80s. I told him everything about the emails, the threats, the little plan to toss me into a senior community. He leaned back in his leather chair, tapping his pen against the desk. Well, he said, sounds like Rebecca isn't as sweet as she looks. What do you want to do about it? I smiled. Rewrite the will. Every cent, every asset. If Daniel doesn't protect me, it goes elsewhere. To charity, to friends, even to the local animal shelter. Anywhere but them. Harris grinned. I like it. Quiet. Sharp. Final. That was step 1. Step 2? I started talking to my neighbors. See, people underestimate seniors in the community. We watch everything. Old Mrs. Green across the street knows everyone's comings and goings better than security camera. I casually mentioned some of the things Rebecca had said, the way she treated me. And wouldn't you know it, turns out I wasn't the only one she'd rubbed the wrong way. She'd insulted a few of them, too, called them nosy or outdated. So when I asked if they'd be willing to keep an eye out, maybe even testify if things got ugly, they agreed without hesitation. Now I had allies, witnesses, backup, but the piece de resistance? Oh, That was my recorder. I carried it everywhere. Family dinners, phone calls, even casual visits. And Rebecca, bless her arrogant little heart, gave me all the ammunition I could ever need. One night at dinner, she hissed under her breath, thinking no one else could hear. Sooner or later, he's going to slip, and we'll prove he's not fit to live alone. Another time, she laughed with a friend on the phone. I swear, once we get his house, I'm ripping out those ugly curtains first thing. Each recording was like another brick in the wall of her downfall. Then came the night I set the stage. I invited Daniel and Rebecca over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pot roast, mashed potatoes, and apple pie. Comfort food, the kind that makes people let their guard down. They arrived, smiling like everything was normal. Rebecca brought another cheap bottle of wine, probably as a joke. We ate, we chatted. And then, as coffee was being poured, Rebecca made her move. So, Dad, she began sweetly, Daniel, and I really think it's time you considered assisted living. We've already looked at some lovely places. You'll be safer, and you won't have to worry about the house anymore. Daniel nodded along, like the bobblehead he had become. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and smiled. You know, Rebecca, that's an interesting suggestion. But before I answer, I have something I'd like to share with both of you. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the little recorder, placed it on the table. Rebecca froze. Daniel frowned. What's that? He asked. I pressed play. And there it was. Her voice, clear as day. The sooner we get him out, the sooner we can renovate and maybe sell the house. Daniel's face went pale. Rebecca's eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I let it play for a good 30 seconds before switching it off. Then I leaned forward and said calmly, So, tell me again, this is about my safety or your greed? Silence, utter silence. But oh, I wasn't done. Not even close. Because that night wasn't just about confronting them. It was about turning the tables completely. And friends, let me tell you, what I revealed next made Rebecca's cheap wine gift look like a kind gesture in comparison. When I pressed stop on that recorder, the room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Rebecca's face turned bright red. Daniel looked like a schoolboy caught cheating on a test. Finally, Rebecca found her voice. You recorded me? That's illegal. I chuckled. No, sweetheart, not when it's in my own home. And not when you were trying to shove me into a senior prison to steal my house. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Dad, this is out of context. I cut him off. Don't insult my intelligent son. I raised you better than that. But apparently, I didn't raise you strong enough to stand up to your wife. Rebecca wasn't to give up without a fight. She slammed her hand on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. You're twisting things. We were just concerned for you. You could fall. You could forget to turn off the stove. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. Concerned? Is that what you call emailing real estate agents behind my back? Is that what you call mocking me to your friends? Calling me a burden? Concerned? Her mouth snapped shut. She hadn't expected me to know about the emails. Daniel's face drained of color. Emails? What emails? Rebecca shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. But it was too late. The truth was oozing out like water through a cracked dam. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, walked slowly to my desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, placed it gently in front of them. This, I said, is my updated will, signed, sealed, notarized. Daniel swallowed hard. Dad, what are you saying? I looked him straight in the eyes. I'm saying that if you two continue down this path, you get nothing. Not the house, not the savings, not even my watch. It all goes to charity, the church, and the local animal shelter. You think I don't know how to protect myself? I do, and I did. Rebecca's jaw dropped. You can't do that. We're your family. I laughed bitterly. Family? Family doesn't try to lock you away so they can gut your house like a fixer-upper. Family doesn't treat you like a burden after you sacrificed everything for them. Just then, the doorbell rang, right on schedule. I opened the door, and in came Mrs. Green from across the street, holding a tray of cookies. Behind her was Mr. Patel, my next-door neighbor. Rebecca blinked in confusion. What is this? I smiled. Oh, just some friends dropping by. You see, I told them what was going on. They've heard the way you talk to me. They've seen the way you treat me. And if this ever goes legal, they'll be more than happy to testify. Rebecca looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. At that moment, Daniel finally snapped out his daze. Rebecca, is it true? Were you really trying to sell Dad's house? Rebecca stammered. I was just planning ahead. For us. For our future. Daniel's voice rose for the first time that night. No, you were planning for yourself. You didn't care about me or about Dad. You just wanted his money in his house. Rebecca's face twisted with fury. Oh, so now you're turning against me? After everything I've done for you? Daniel buried his face in his hands. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. I let the silence stretch, then leaned on the table, my voice low but steady. Rebecca, you thought you could humiliate me with a cheap bottle of wine. You thought you could steal my home, erase me from my own life. But you forgot one thing. Rebecca glared at me, her eyes filled with venom. And what's that? I smiled. Old men don't get weaker. We get wiser. And wisdom beats greed every single time. I grabbed the cheap bottle of wine she had brought that night, uncorked it, and poured it straight down the sink. The glugging sound echoed through the kitchen like a victory drum. Then I turned back to her and said, "Now get out of my house." She stormed out, muttering under her breath. Daniel followed slowly, torn between his wife and his father. As the door closed behind them, Mrs. Green patted my shoulder. "You did the right thing," she whispered. I nodded, staring at the empty doorway. Maybe, but the war isn't over. Not yet. Because I knew Rebecca well enough to understand. She wasn't going to take this lying down. And friends, the next move she made? Oh, it pushed this family drama into dangerous new territory. You'd think after being humiliated at my table, Rebecca would back off. That maybe she'd lick her wounds, swallow her pride, and let things cool down. But no, Rebecca wasn't built that way. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this. Greedy people don't quit. They double down. The very next week, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Rebecca. It was a man in a suit holding a clipboard. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm from Adult Protective Services. We receive a report of possible self-neglect." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "The report says you may not be able to safely care for yourself, leaving the stove on, forgetting to take medications, unsafe living conditions." My blood boiled. I knew exactly who had filed that report. Rebecca. I invited the man in politely. He looked around my house, checked my fridge, asked me a few memory questions. By the time he left, he was shaking his head and smiling. "Sir, you're sharper than half the people I know. Sorry for the inconvenience." But I wasn't sorry. I was furious. Because this wasn't just an insult anymore. This was war. Later that evening, Daniel showed up alone. He stood in my living room, shifting from foot to foot like a nervous child. "Dad, Rebecca thinks you're blowing this out of proportion. She's just worried about us, about the future." I stared at him, my jaw tight. "Daniel, listen to me. She reported me to the state. She's trying to brand me incompetent. Do you understand what that means? If that sticks, I lose control of everything. My money, my house, my independence." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe she just misunderstood. Maybe she thought. I slammed my fist on the armrest of my chair, making him jump. "Stop defending her. You're my son, Daniel. I raised you to stand up for what's right, not to roll over for someone else's greed. If you can't see that, then maybe I failed as a father." His eyes filled with tears, but he said nothing. He left that night, shoulders slumped like a man torn in two. That's when I knew. If I wanted to end this once and for all, I couldn't just defend myself. I had to strike back. So I went back to Mr. Harris, my lawyer. We filed paperwork, ironclad. My assets, my accounts, my property, all locked up in a living trust. with clear instructions that neither Daniel nor Rebecca could touch a dime if I was declared unfit. Then I took a step further. I wrote letters, handwritten, signed, sealed, one to my pastor, one to the local newspaper editor, one to the town council. Each letter detailed what Rebecca had tried to do. I didn't mail them. Not yet, but I kept them in a folder marked, "To be open if anything happens to me." Rebecca wanted a war? Well, I had just built myself an army. 2 weeks later, Daniel and Rebecca showed up again. This time, they didn't even bother pretending. Rebecca stood in my living room, her arms crossed. "You're making this harder than it has to be. We already found a place for you. All you need to do is sign the paperwork." I leaned back in my chair, calm as could be. "And what if I don't?" Her lips curled into a smirk. "Then we'll make sure you don't have a choice." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't speak. I smiled, reached into my desk drawer, and pulled out a thick stack of papers, slid them across the table. "Funny you say that, because I've already signed paperwork of my own. A living trust. This house? Off limits. My accounts? Untouchable. And if anything happens to me, anything at all, letters go out to the press, the church, and the police, with names, dates, evidence." Rebecca's smirk vanished. You can't." I cut her off. "I can, and I did." For the first time, Daniel finally snapped. He turned on his wife, his face twisted with anger. "Rebecca, I'm done. I'm done lying for you, covering for you, letting you drag me into this mess. My dad deserves better. If you can't see that, then maybe this marriage is what I thought it was." Rebecca's face turned white as snow. You're choosing him over me?" Daniel's voice cracked. "I'm choosing what's right." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. For the first time in months, my house was quiet, peaceful. Daniel sat across from me, his head in his hands. "Dad," I don't know what to say. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then don't say anything. Just learn. Learn from this. Family is supposed to protect each other, not tear each other apart. And if Rebecca can't understand that, maybe she was never really family at all." He nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. "So here I am, friends, 74 years old, still standing, still fighting. My daughter-in-law tried to bury me with cheap wine and greed, but in the end, it was her own thirst that ruined her. Some people say revenge is bitter. Me, I think it tastes a lot like freedom. But now I want to ask you, am I the villain here? Or just a man who refused to be pushed out of his own life? Tell me in the comments. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because trust me, I've got plenty more stories where this one came from.